I think we can jump right into it. So I think today's session is really close to my heart personally as well, and it's something that's really grown over the 2 years that we've been in this strange situation with the pandemic, which is compassionate leadership. And Michelle's here today, kind of talking to us about engaging people and elevating performance through compassionate leadership. Michelle has over 20 years of experience in the HR and OD space, so is definitely an expert in her field. But I think what's really interesting is that her passion is around, making sure that there's enough importance being given to creating a supportive culture as we move to a more digital age. So she's going to be sharing with us a very compelling case for compassionate leadership, and she'll be linking it to her E.L.E.V.A.T.E model. I can't wait personally to know more about it. So without further ado, I'll hand over to you, Michelle, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity. I'm hoping everybody can see the screen okay. Brilliant, great stuff. Yes, compassion is absolutely my passion, and it's something particularly, as you said, Swati, that over the last couple of years has really came into everybody's sort of zone, really, because what we learned over the last couple of years with the pandemic, with the cost of living crisis now, is that actually work isn't just about the 9 to 5. People do bring with them some of the issues and the concerns that are going on in their life, and what we need to try and do is help people to be able to support themselves. What I do notice as well is PPMA are promoting Self-Care September, and so I think this is absolute pertinent time to really start to think about these things. So I want to talk today, I want to draw on lived experience. I want to draw on your lived experiences as well. So if in the chat you want to share things, or you want to say things, or say what your organisation is doing, all that is brilliant sort of fodder really for this movement and where we want to take things. So I'm just going to talk about what the agenda will be for today. So first of all, what is compassionate leadership? There are various different definitions. The E.L.E.V.A.T.E model that Swati quite rightly talked about is just a way just to get people thinking, and it's based on research and it's based on theory and practice. So I just wanted something practical that people could use. I'm going to be sharing books and links, and I'm going to be sharing the slides. PPMA have requested that I share the slides with them, so they're going to share the slides afterwards. So that just resolves that question straight away, because I won't cover every single slide, but I wanted to make sure you had lots of information. And finally, the obvious one is just how you can stay in touch if this appeals, or if this is of interest to you. So let's get into it. First of all, I wanted to resolve a common myth. My 5-year-old inspired me with this picture, but there is a common myth that actually compassionate leadership is soft and fluffy, and maybe the name doesn't help, but actually it's quite the reverse, and it's quite the opposite. And when you do get into it, what you actually find is what some of the big sort of speakers like Professor Michael West, who's particularly big in the NHS around this space, they talk about that actually command and control leadership is a bit of an opt-out. What compassionate leadership is about having honest conversations with positive intention. So it's actually something that you can sort of add or integrate with your existing leadership style, but it is about actually you do still deliver the hard messages. It's not about you run away from that, but what you actually do is think about how that message is landing and how you can do the best for that individual and act with positive intention. I was asked by the University of Birmingham as part of International Women's Day to think about a phrase that I could sort of use to promote this, because I've been doing talks with their MBA students. And I did think about Descartes, who I studied many moons ago, the sort of the philosopher during the Enlightenment period. And I thought about what they said about, I think, therefore I am. And I came up with, I believe we care because we can. It is something innate in the vast majority of us. And actually, since the pandemic, we've seen people bring together. We've seen virtual communities. We've seen pizza nights online during the lockdown and quiz nights. So we've seen that people do have that capacity to do that. And what's really important is we don't want to lose that now. We've got it. We know how to do it. We know how to work together and pull together. So we want to just keep that momentum going. This, in the compassionate leadership field, is one of the big models that is always shared. It's from a project that was done with the Harvard Business Review, and a couple of authors called Hugard and Harte, which I will talk about a bit later on. But the big thing that I want people to take from this model is the move from empathy to compassion. What is the actual difference? And the difference is that compassion is action. So empathy, you can feel for somebody and you can really, care about their situation. But what compassion does is it takes it one step further and says, okay, how can I help this individual? Is it a signpost? Is it helping them towards a service? Is it just listening? Is it going for a coffee break or a walk? Or if it's on an agile situation, is it saying, actually, in a private chat, you didn't seem okay today? Would you mind if we just had a quick catch up? Anything like that, where you actually take some form of action on feeling something, is an act of compassion. And this Harvard Business Review, you always get the question, what's the business case? So I've put it right here now for you. This was a big research project. And if you look, particularly at the employee bit, you can see that 150,000 employees were also interviewed. So it wasn't just a top-down approach. Some huge companies, IKEA, Netflix, Lego Group, KPMG, some really big names. But also, interestingly, it went worldwide. It went to places where there are, distinct organizational cultural differences and cultural differences per se. And the results were similar. And the key results that came out of it were actually the people that get promoted faster through the organization are the people that do demonstrate compassionate leadership tendencies. 66% felt that they had lower stress as a consequence of adopting compassionate leadership strategies. And I do think some of that is about, actually, if you're constantly walking into an environment where there's toxicity or negativity, that will impact upon your stress levels. Whereas if you're in a kind of honest and open environment, I'm not particularly personally surprised. If you are surprised by these, by the way, do say so in the chat. More than double leaders didn't want to quit when they were in this kind of engaged, compassionate environment. And, interestingly, 14% higher performance came out and greater job engagement. And I will try and explain that 14% as we go along. So what I did is I read lots of books. I'm probably just going to quickly show you. You can see I read lots and lots and lots of books on compassionate leadership. And this was a model that came out of, all that reading. I thought, how can I just bring that all together? Because people don't have time to read all these books. And this is my E.L.E.V.A.T.E model. And all I would say to people is, when you're thinking of doing a strategy or a policy or even a get together or a consultation, it's just about thinking about these sort of 7 steps, really. And you will have this. So obviously you can, if you go to meetings, you can have it in front of you, just to remind you of the different things that really do impact workforce culture. So I'm going to go through each of these in turn. Quite a whistle-stop tour, as you'll appreciate, but I just think this will be useful to sort of get some models and some unique things that you can use in your organisation. So E is for empathise. You've got to start from the point of caring, otherwise, it's a really difficult place to be. And I know some people during my when it went out, LinkedIn and Twitter, came on and said, well, okay, what about people who don't care but pretend to care? Well, you're not going to avoid that per se. You're not going to ever get to a point where that doesn't happen. But if you have a culture, an empathetic culture, it makes it harder for that kind of behaviour to go on, because people will call it out. And that's what we're really looking for. So E is for empathise. And I found this model, forgive me, it's the only model that I've been able to find without knowing where the source was. But I saw this on the internet, which seem to have all the elements that we want to see in organisations: psychological safety, inclusion, diversity, and performance. But the key thing that I felt was missing was actually that compassionate leadership needs to be there to encourage that psychological safety, to begin those processes in the first place. So these things are all vitally important. If we're going to empathise, we need to appreciate that our organisations need to be diverse and inclusive. And to do that, compassionate leadership is the way to actually start to build those trust and psychological safety matters. And just some things about authentic leadership. To build trust, you've got to be not afraid to be vulnerable. So that's one of the first things I want to say is, I'm not saying you share chapter and verse about your life, and you'll see that this says NB, not too little, not too much. But what you do need to do is, you know, not be afraid to say, oh, that didn't quite work out. You know, if you make a mistake, you know, as we all do, you know, that acknowledgement that you're human helps other people to think, well, actually, we don't want to make mistakes, obviously, but actually we can take risks, and sometimes those things will not work out. Putting yourself before others sometimes, and really knowing that you cannot do it all on your own. And again, when we've got more time, you can obviously have a look through these images when they're shared. And also, it's about actually not getting defensive when people do bring what I would call their boundary setting sentences. Sometimes people genuinely don't have capacity and are frightened to say they don't have it, particularly at the moment, because no one really has capacity. But what we don't want is people to tip over. So really, some days, you know, I've done in the past a daily stand-up where everybody gets together for a couple of minutes in a morning and just asks each other how they are. And if somebody is particularly struggling and you've created that psychological safety, one of the team would always go back to that individual and see how they are afterwards. So it didn't necessarily have to be the line manager's responsibility, but the whole team's had a supportive structure around them. So we got used to boundary setting sentences. You know, I'm not comfortable discussing that. There might be something that you know, allude to or pull upon that somebody doesn't want to speak about, and that's okay too. Feedback, I appreciate the gesture, but in future I prefer. These are things we've got to get used to people saying to us. And also that one about I'm allowed to change my mind. I know many leaders on this call, sometimes everything seems sacrosanct and set in stone, but yeah, just being honest with people and saying, actually, I'm allowed to change my mind. You know, I'm allowed to think, well, this isn't the way to go forward, and that's something that I'm allowed to do. Helping other people to see what is going on in their world is also an interesting exercise, and sometimes we can get into compassion fatigue. And what I say to people is there's some things in the world that we can't control, but they do impact us. You know, world peace, threat of war, the pandemic we couldn't control, economic crises we can't control. But sometimes when people get into that zone of everything seems overwhelming, having these compassion circles can help them to think about what actually do I need to focus on. So it's really useful to do with staff who are feeling overwhelmed, to get them to think about what am I actually in control of, which is 1 basically on the diagram. Then 2 is what can I sort of you know, do to you know, with 2. Some of them I might be able to do, like I might be able to affect my productivity at work, but if I'm waiting for someone else, then maybe I've just got to accept that I'm waiting for someone else. And 3 really is where we don't really have a lot of control over, and then it just helps people to think, well, actually I don't have control over this space, but I do have control over that. I just wanted to pause for a second because I'm conscious that I talked a while, just to see if there's anything in the chat that people have said or want to add.
There's no question in the chat at the moment, Michelle, but I don't know if anyone has a question and wants to raise their hands or post their questions now. No.
Okay,
no?
I'm happy to move on. I just didn't want to lose people on this journey. So L is the second part of the model, which is to listen, which is surprisingly difficult actually. because sometimes we listen to respond. We don't actually listen to what's been said to us. So it is a skill in itself. I got this first little diagram from Vince Staler, who basically said, really, in essence, I can't remember the exact quote, to stop building castles and start to build tents. So I've been talking to the University Hospital Coventry and Warwickshire Trust, and what they're doing is creating compassion circles and having a compassionate group. So we can actually go into the organisation in these tents, in inverted commas, and actually find out, do these things that we are doing actually resonate? So when we do a wellbeing strategy, is it resonating? Is it helping people? What more do people need to see? And in the NHS, these compassion circles are starting to grow. But it did occur to me, why couldn't it work in local government? And there are some similarities, particularly in the sort of adult and children's social care parts of our services, where there is this frontline need to give a lot of compassion to our citizens, and therefore we need to check in on the people who are giving all that compassion. So that's an idea for you. Another one is to just really think about praising effort and not just ability. You're always going to have your stars and your talent and people like that, but actually some people are really, really trying, and they might be trying in difficult circumstances. So just making sure that you're, consistent with that. Another one is around booking appointments to talk versus you see something's wrong and you actually think, actually, I just need to check in on that person. So not always leaving everything to a one-to-one, but getting a culture where it's not down to you as a leader, and that other people will start to check in on each other, is a really good way to make sure that capacity doesn't get drained, but actually people form a support network, particularly in a hybrid stroke agile environment. And finally, letting people take risks, and that's just where I think we do sometimes struggle in local government in particular. From my experience, is that I ask this question out: how comfortable do you feel about taking risks? And normally the response is quite sort of low, and that might be because some parts of our services we can't take risks, but sometimes it can be that people are frightened to take risks because the culture doesn't feel that they can. Again, I'm not going to share this, but if you've need a bit more of a sorry, I'm not going to talk about this, but if you feel that you need more of an understanding of levels of listening, this is a useful diagram to have a look over when we've got more time. But I did want to share this quote, which is about sort of what makes a great listener, and really our own opinion, which is why, please do contribute in the chat, because this is just my opinion and I'd love to hear yours, is really the lowest form of human knowledge, because it doesn't require any understanding. So the highest form is empathy. And this suspending of our egos is really, really important, because we might hear things we don't want to hear, like, you're not communicating with me right, or I don't feel you've listened to me. And sometimes we have to suspend our own egos and what might be our own truth, and understand that whatever we intended to do, it didn't quite land in the way we wanted it to, and have that real sort of conversation and be able to take that feedback. So I thought that was really useful. Again, some tips for when I share the slides. But E is for engage. I think this is vital and this is fundamental, and a lot of the stuff that I do is around employee engagement. And I love this. I completely love this. If there's nothing else that resonates with you today, I hope this one does, is that really, if we stay in a command and control environment, the highest we can get on this diagram is expertise, which is great. We want expertise. But what we're increasingly wanting, I hear about transformation culture, innovation culture, is this top triangle here. And that is what I believe is the 14%. That is the discretionary effort that people can give you. But if they don't feel comfortable, if they don't feel safe, if they don't feel supported, you will not get that. You will get degrees of it, But then people will feel, you know, their wings are clipped, or they can't exercise that creativity and that initiative and that real big space. And if you look and have a think about your organisation and how it's structured, think about how far down that organisation you want initiative. It's actually quite far down a public service organisation. And therefore, if we stay in a command and control or a traditional hierarchical structure, which basically these things were created sort of post-war, and we don't move to a time where we're a bit more freedom and enabling and giving more initiative, then we're stuck where we are and we won't really progress forward, irrespective of job titles and saying we're transformation and saying that we're this new initiative. This stuff is really important. The behaviours are really important. What is also on the, sorry,
we've got a question from Gordon. I think it probably alludes to the quotation around opinion. Gordon, do you want to come in and just say anything about it?
Yeah, thanks, Swati. Yeah, it was just a really quick one, Michelle, around that sort of, you know, opinion. And I was just wondering whether is there a difference or a differential, whether that is kind of based on knowledge. So I'm giving you opinion based on my experience and knowledge, or I'm sitting down in front of somebody and I'm just giving an opinion based on my assumptions and I'm not actually testing things out. Is that latter bit is kind of what that quote refers to?
Yeah, I think, brilliant point, actually, Gordon. First of all,
they don't happen very often.
I think that what I took from the quote, and obviously I don't know Bill, but what I took from the quote was really when you're sort of giving an opinion in particular, I think sometimes coaching others to form their own opinions is a better way of A, engaging, B, ensuring that they're on board with what you want to do, and C, giving them people feeling empowered that they are then taking the next step. So it might be that you give your opinion in all of that. That's absolutely fine. But it's about that whole coaching culture around and about, you know, do I feel heard? Do I feel empowered? Do I feel involved? Do I feel included? And so, yeah, that's how I took the quote. But I don't know, Bill, maybe you meant something completely different, but that's what I took from the quote. But it's useful that you mention it, because it's not saying you don't impart your own knowledge, absolutely not. But what you want to do is draw out the knowledge from other people so that you can, you know, they say diverse teams are the best teams, and we've all got different lived experiences and different life experiences. And sometimes our teams know more than us. So it is about that. So thank you, Gordon.
Thanks, that's really helpful.
Thank you. Phil's put something in the chat as well, and he says, I love this model, difference between average versus exceptional performance. Yes, the slides will be shared later on, Phil, so you'll have that. And then he says, I guess it's a difference between my way, your way, and seeking a third better way. I think in context with what you were just saying, Michelle.
I think Phil said it much better than I did, which case in point, right? But brilliant. Yeah, and it does lead actually seamlessly onto this employee activism model that I found, because increasingly people are joining organisations for purpose, and what they're not doing is joining just for like status reasons. So there is more activism that goes on. And what they mean by activism is, you know, people wanting to give their views. So it's not like activism as in, you know. So challenging the status quo is where we get the innovation. And feeling comfortable to challenge the status quo is where the compassionate leadership comes in. I'm really conscious of time. Am I allowed to go over time or not?
I think it depends on how many people can stay on, but I think we might have a few minutes after that. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. So this is Simon Sinek. I know a number of you will know him, and this is a great video on curiosity and finding out what people think and views. But I won't share that because of time pressure. V is for visibility. I will cover this because basically this is the new world, folks, and there's lots of ways to connect with people. And I suppose the big point is, you know, what do your What do your employees use? Do they use TikTok? Do they use WhatsApp? Do they prefer to text messages to each other? You know, do they, we in my last organization, when I was working in an organization, not working for myself, we had like a support WhatsApp chat so that we all, you know, connected with each other. Do you have something like Yammer in your organization, or equivalent, or Teams chats that are wide enough to know what your employees are thinking? So it's again, this is the way the world is moving, so keeping up with that world is quite important. And this is a great video. I won't share it during today, but this is a really good example of how social media changes, and we need to keep up with social media. So this shows how the most popular social networks radically changed during COVID, and it's about us, you know, if we're wanting to attract and include a diverse workforce, and we want to get a diverse workforce, you know, watching these trends is really going to be vital. When we are engaging, you know, we ask for people to come on screen, and I think it's a good thing because it's nice to see faces, but some people don't want to do that, and it is about respecting that and always offering different mediums for people to connect. So the chat, some people prefer to chat, some people prefer to chat afterwards, after reflecting, and sometimes it's just about, provided you're noticing it and you're noticing that someone's been quiet, it doesn't really matter as long as you then at some point engage them. So it's one to watch. Is everyone getting the chance to speak? Am I maintaining interest? You know, am I energizing? You know, if this was a different kind of setup, I'd have wanted more interaction in terms of like Mentimeter and stuff like that in my normal day work, because people they drift off, and you know, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just how we're built. But just notice, am I noticing the people who aren't there? So that's just a useful sort of test. I'm going to go on for, I think I can do it in 2 minutes. Is that okay? So tips for virtual meetings. That's something you can read in your own time. But A is for appreciation. And there's lots of ways to appreciate. Just a few tips here. I'll mention 2. Only give it when it's earned. Otherwise, it just sounds just twee and you're doing it for the sake of it. But never ration it. You know, people do need to know that they're doing a good job. And if you show you care, it has been shown that it's caring and not money that does affect hearts, and that makes people want to perform. So appreciation is important. Just make sure you know that, be reasonable. You know, you can't get a quart into a pint pot. So, you know, during the pandemic, I'm sure many of you, I don't need to say this even, you know, had to change your expectations on performance, and certainly, you know, just know what gives and always be aware of that. And there's just a bit around paying attention and diagnosing culture, which we can do in your own time. T is imperative for trust. People need to trust you before they will trust your message, and they will form judgments based on what they see, hear and feel, and some of that you can't control. So trust is vital. Just some more on that. This is a card game you can do if you want to cut it out, and take it to your teams and say, you know, do you think we've got permission to do these things? And if not, you know, encourage a dialogue. And it might be that you don't want to encourage this permission, but it might be that might be something that you want to explore with your teams. I'm desperate on time, but this is a great model if you want to you want to check in on yourself. Sometimes you might be being too caring and too you know, and what you do is you avoid tough messages because you think, oh well, what if I upset somebody? Wise compassion, box 2 is the place that you really want to be. So just always think, am I being too lenient? Am I trying to absorb someone else's feelings at the expense of performance, versus, you know, getting tough things done in a human way? And I can talk more on that obviously, but I don't have the time, but there are slides around that. Put yourself first. It is Self-Care September. Just make sure you do what you need to do in terms of getting your strength. Some people like mindfulness, some people like walks, nature, pets, being with a family, whatever it is. Don't put those things last, even if those pressures at work are building. They're vitally important. And finally, I'm there. E is for embed, and that is in everything that you do. Attraction, recruitment, onboarding, management and development, reward and retention, and exit. You know, include this stuff, because even when people exit, they can be ambassadors for your organization. So really do think about, okay, when I'm doing a recruitment policy, am I being inclusive? You know, how has the previous recruitment process gone down with employees? You know, induction, that's the massive one that people don't tend to get right. So just embed it in everything that you do. There's a lovely poem if I had more time, and there's loads of resources and links that I'm sharing with you just if you want to explore this further. And finally, these are my contact details. And thank you very much. And sorry, I'm 4 minutes over.
No, thank you so much, Michelle. That's amazing. I feel like we could have been sitting here for another half an hour listening to you with a lot of pleasure. So thank you for that. I think you've kind of left us with a lot of room for thought and you know, provoking kind of ideas. So thank you. We've thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you for everyone for being here and sticking around. We bring this to a close very quickly. But before I go, I just wanted to sort of mention about our next webinar, which is going to be the start of our 2020 award winners series. The first one will be with Southwark City Council on Monday, the 5th of September at 11:30 p.m. and 11:30 a.m., not p.m. And I thought I just realized I never introduced myself. So before I say goodbye, hi, I'm Swati, and I'm the head of talent performance and innovation at Westminster City Council. I'm also a member of the PPMA board and a participant of Peer of the Future last year. So it's great to meet you all, and hope you have a lovely Friday and a lovely weekend ahead. Thank you again, Michelle, and hope you all have a great time ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.